I waited for him for 10 years. 10 long years where the world changed around me, but I stood still, frozen in time, holding on to a dream that was never mine to begin with. I wrote to him every week. I visited whenever I could. I defended him when people called me foolish, and I gave up opportunities because I believed love was worth it. I imagined the day he would come home and we would start our life together, just like we always talked about. But the truth was something I could have never prepared for. The man I was waiting for, the man I loved so deeply, had been building a life without me. He had moved on while I was still holding on. And when I finally saw the truth with my own eyes, it was not just heartbreak I felt. It was betrayal, a deep, gut-wrenching realization that everything I believed in had been a lie. He did not wait for me. In fact, I was never in his future at all. I was just a memory he left behind, too afraid or too cruel to tell me the truth. And I had to face the world all over again, alone. We met during a summer that felt like a dream. I remember the way the sun fell on the pavement that day, golden and warm, as if the universe had paused just to let us find each other. It was not a storybook meeting, nothing dramatic or out of the ordinary. He was a friend of a friend at a small backyard gathering, the kind of event where people bring folding chairs and paper plates and hope the weather holds out. But when our eyes met across that yard, something shifted. It was subtle, but I felt it. A quiet pull, an unspoken connection. He had this way of smiling that felt both boyish and confident, as though he knew exactly how to read a room but did not need to prove anything. We spent hours talking that night, even as the others drifted away, even as the night grew cooler and the bugs came out. He asked questions not just to make conversation but to understand me. He listened in a way few people ever had. When he spoke about his life, his dreams, his struggles, I saw a depth in him that was rare. He was not just handsome. He was driven, thoughtful, and complex. He told me about how he wanted to start his own business one day, how he had made mistakes in the past but was learning from them. He spoke with a kind of raw honesty that made me feel like I was being let in on a secret. That first night turned into phone calls, and then late-night drives, and then long walks where we would talk about everything and nothing. He remembered little things about me. My favorite type of tea, the way I like to read the last page of a book first, just in case the story broke my heart. He was attentive, protective in a quiet way, and when he held my hand, I felt grounded. For the first time in a long time I felt safe. My friends were cautious, especially when they learned about parts of his past that were a bit rough around the edges. He had a history, sure, but he never hid that from me. He told me about it openly, not as an excuse but as an explanation. He had grown up in a tough neighborhood, made some bad choices, fallen in with the wrong crowd. But he had worked hard to rise above it, to build a better future. He had a job, he was taking night classes, and he was focused. And when he looked at me, I saw a man who was trying, really trying, to become someone he could be proud of. I believed in him. I believed in us. I began to imagine a future together. Something simple, something real. Maybe a little apartment with mismatched furniture, Sunday mornings with coffee and music, shared routines and quiet joy. I imagined what it would be like to come home to him every day, to build a life together brick by brick. He made me feel like I was part of something bigger than myself, like my love had the power to heal, to anchor, to transform. We had been together for just over a year when everything changed. It was a rainy Thursday, the kind of day where the sky hangs heavy and gray, and the world feels damp and slow. He had kissed me goodbye that morning, told me he would call me later. But the call never came. Instead, I got a knock on my door from one of his friends, face pale and eyes wide. He had been arrested. Not just arrested, taken into custody for something serious. Something that could not be explained away or brushed off. I remember the details blurring together. Charges, court dates, confusion. My heart felt like it was beating in my throat. He swore it was a misunderstanding. He told me he had nothing to do with it, that he had been in the wrong place at the wrong time. And I believed him. I wanted to believe him so badly that I clung to every word, every whispered promise that he would come home soon. I stood by him when most people would have walked away. I sat in courtrooms, I spoke to lawyers. I waited outside detention centers just for a few minutes with him through a glass divider. When the sentence was handed down, it felt like the air was sucked out of the world. 10 years. 10 years. Felt impossible. How could they expect a person to wait 10 years? But I did not hesitate. I told him I would wait. And I meant it. I meant every word. Because in that moment, I still believed that love was enough. That time and distance could not destroy something that real, that strong. I told myself we would survive this. That we would come out stronger. That this was just a chapter, not the end. I held on to hope like it was oxygen. And I began to measure my life in visits and letters and countdowns. The world moved forward, but I stayed right there. In love, in waiting, in the shadow of a promise that I thought was mutual. I had no idea what was waiting for me at the end of those 10 years. No idea at all. The first year was the hardest. Everything still felt raw, unreal, like I had stepped into someone else's life. I kept waking up hoping it was a nightmare I could shake off. But the truth was written in ink on court papers and prison records. He was gone, locked away behind concrete walls and metal bars, and there was nothing I could do to bring him home. Still, I refused to let go. I made a decision, one that felt right in my heart, even though the world around me shook its head in disbelief. Chose to stay. Every week I wrote to him. Long letters filled with stories about my day, updates about my family, little reminders that I was still here and still his. I poured myself into those letters, trying to recreate a life for him in words. I sent photos, pressed flowers, little trinkets I thought would make him smile. I memorized his inmate number, learned how to navigate the prison system, and scheduled visits as often as they would allow. I waited in long lines under buzzing fluorescent lights just to sit across from him for an hour or two, to feel his eyes on me, even if I could not feel his touch. Money became another layer of the commitment. Prison was not free, and I quickly realized how many small things cost more than I ever imagined. I sent funds for his commissary so he could buy toothpaste, snacks, writing supplies. I mailed books, filled out forms, and spent hours trying to track down information whenever he needed it. I adjusted my budget, said no to trips and nights out, and picked up extra hours just to keep up. I never told him how tight things became. I wanted him to feel cared for, not like a burden. His birthdays were especially hard. I made it a tradition to bake a cake each year, even if no one else would eat it. I would light candles, close my eyes, and make a wish for his freedom, for our future. On our anniversary, I would dress up and spend the evening listening to the playlist we had made together, pretending he was beside me. Holidays were even lonelier. I watched families gather, couples exchange gifts, and I felt the ache of his absence in every quiet moment. But still I stayed. As time passed, I began to feel the weight of my decision in deeper, quieter ways. Opportunities slipped by. Job offers in new cities, friendships that faded, people I might have loved if my heart had not been tethered to someone who could not walk through the door. There were moments when I felt like my life was on pause while everyone else kept moving forward. My friends got married, had children, traveled the world. I became the woman people whispered about, the one who was still waiting. My family tried to be supportive at first. My mother told me she admired my loyalty, though I could see the worry in her eyes. As the years wore on, their patience wore thin. They began to ask questions. How long was I really planning to wait? Was I sure he was being honest? Did I not want more for myself? It was not that they did not love me, they did. But they could not understand why I was giving so much of my life to a man they barely knew, a man they only saw through headlines and court reports. Eventually, some conversations turned into arguments. I stopped bringing him up, even when he was all I could think about. Inside those 10 years were countless highs and lows, each one carving a new layer into my heart. There were moments when I believed we were almost there. Parole hearings that felt like glimmers of hope. He would call me after a meeting with his lawyer, voice buzzing with cautious excitement, and we would dream together about what life would look like on the outside. We talked about opening a small business, about finding a little place to live, about rebuilding from the ground up. I would lie in bed after those calls, staring at the ceiling, imagining a home filled with laughter, music, and second chances. But there were also setbacks. Delayed hearings, denied appeals, changes in regulations that pushed his release date further away. Each disappointment chipped away at me, but I held on. I held on because he needed me. I held on because I had promised. And most of all, I held on because I truly believed that the love we shared was real. Sometimes, though, I felt the cracks forming. There were moments when he grew distant, when his letters became shorter, when our phone calls felt rushed. He would say he was tired, overwhelmed, dealing with things on his end. I told myself it was stress. I told myself it was hard for him too. I did not push. I tried to be understanding. But there were nights when I cried myself to sleep, clutching a letter that had arrived days late, rereading every line and searching for something, anything that would reassure me. I clung to the past, to the memory of the man I had fallen in love with. I reminded myself of the way he used to look at me, of the warmth in his voice, of the promises he made. I told myself that the world was simply cruel, but that our love could survive it. And so I waited. I waited as seasons changed, as presidents changed, as the world grew louder and faster and more connected, while I lived between walls of memory and hope. In the 8th year, I had a chance to move across the country for a job that would have changed everything for me. It was a leadership role in an industry I had worked hard to break into, with a generous salary and room to grow. I turned it down. I told them I needed to stay close to home for personal reasons. But the truth was simpler. I could not leave him. The prison was 2 hours away, and I needed to be there if something happened, if he needed me, if a visit opened up on short notice. I sacrificed my career, my financial security, my independence, all for a man who lived behind steel doors. People told me I was strong. They said I was loyal, devoted, admirable. But sometimes I did not feel strong. Felt hollow. I felt like a shadow of the person I used to be. I began to wonder who I was outside of this waiting. What did I like? What made me happy? I had spent so long centering my life around him that I forgot how to live for myself. Still I counted down. I marked off days on calendars. Plan. Save. I believed that one day, all of this would be worth it. That he would walk out of those gates and wrap me in his arms and tell me that everything I had done, everything I had given, had not been in vain. I imagined our first real night together in years. I imagined the look in his eyes. I imagined our future finally beginning. But what I never imagined was the possibility that he might not feel the same way. That he might not have held on to me the way I held on to him. That he might have let go somewhere along the way and never found the courage to tell me. That was the part one never prepared for. That was the betrayal I never saw coming. And when it finally arrived, it would break me in ways I never thought possible. But for now, in the prison of hope I had built around myself, I kept believing, kept waiting. Because love, I thought, was about standing by someone no matter what. And I had no idea how close I was to learning just how wrong I had been. It is strange how hindsight changes everything. The things that seemed small, the moments I brushed off without a second thought, now scream at me with painful clarity. I wish I could say there was one big moment when I knew something was wrong, one sharp and undeniable sign. But that is not how it happened. It was slow. It was quiet. It was like a leak beneath the floorboards, slowly rotting the foundation while everything above still looked fine. The first signs were subtle. There was a change in his letters. They used to be long, thoughtful, filled with stories and questions and promises. He would ask me about my dreams, tell me about his days, describe the books he was reading and the people he had met. I clung to every word because it made me feel close to him, like he was still a part of my world. But after the 3rd year, they began to feel different. Order. Less personal. He stopped asking about me and started focusing only on himself. His frustrations, his anger, his needs. I convinced myself it was the stress. That it was normal for someone in his situation to become withdrawn. That prison was breaking him down and I needed to be strong for both of us. Then there were the missed calls. First he called like clockwork. I knew the sound of that phone at the exact hour, and I would drop anything to answer. But then the calls became less frequent. Sometimes days would pass without a word. When I asked, he always had an explanation. Lockdown, limited access to the phone, trouble with the guards. I never questioned it. Why would I? He had never lied to me before. Or so I believed. My friends started to notice first. They pointed out how distant he seemed. They reminded me of the times I had cancelled plans just to stay home in case he called. They noticed how often I defended him. How I always had a reason ready when something did not feel right. One friend, in particular, sat me down over coffee and told me she was worried. She said I looked tired, like I was fading. She asked me if I had considered that maybe he was not the same person anymore. That maybe I was giving too much of myself to someone who was no longer giving back. Got defensive. I told her she did not understand, that love was not always easy, that people make mistakes and deserve grace. I clung to the idea that I knew him better than anyone else, that what we had was not something that could be judged from the outside. I believed that my loyalty made me stronger, that it was something noble and beautiful. I told myself that real love endures, that it waits, that it forgives. But the truth is, deep down I had started to feel it too. The emptiness in our conversations, the way he avoided certain questions, how he never spoke about the future anymore, not the way he used to. I told myself it was the weight of prison life, that he was depressed, that he was protecting me from his darkness. But sometimes I wondered if he was simply slipping away and I was too afraid to admit it. I remember one visit clearly. It was in the 6th year. I had taken time off work, driven through a storm, waited 2 hours just to see him. When he walked into the visitation room, something was different. He smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. He sat across from me, answered my questions with short responses, looked around the room more than he looked at me. I reached for his hand and he let me hold it, but there was no warmth, no spark. I asked if everything was all right and he nodded, said he was just tired. I believed him. Or rather, I chose to. That is the part that hurts the most now. How many things I chose to believe because the alternative was too painful. I ignored the coldness. I ignored the fact that he stopped saying, "I love you," at the end of every letter. I ignored the way he spoke less and less about what we would do when he got out. I told myself it was all temporary. That once he was free, we would find each other again. Even when he asked for more money, more often and in higher amounts, I justified it. He said things had changed, that it was harder inside, that he needed it for protection or supplies. I sent what I could. I borrowed when I had to. And still, I never asked too many questions. I did not want to hear anything that would force me to reevaluate the truth I had built my world around. There were other signs, too. Strange stories about new friends he had made inside, people who seemed to have a bigger role in his life than I did. I asked about them and he always brushed it off. Said they were just friends. Said they helped him pass the time. I felt jealous, but I swallowed it. I reminded myself that he was in a place where he needed support in any form. That I could not be there every second. That it did not mean anything. But something in me knew, even then, that I was no longer the center of his world. When he forgot my birthday one year, I cried for hours. Not because I needed a gift or a card, but because it meant he had stopped thinking about me the way I thought about him. When I brought it up, he apologized, said time was hard to keep track of in there. That it was not personal. That he loved me. I believed him. Because believing him was easier than facing the truth. Looking back now, I understand that I was not just in love. I was in denial. I built a fantasy around a man who no longer existed, or maybe never did. I ignored my instincts, silenced my doubts, pushed away the people who tried to help me. I thought I was being brave, but I was really just afraid. Afraid that everything I had sacrificed would be for nothing. That I had wasted the best years of my life on someone who had already let go. I was so focused on being loyal, on proving that love could survive anything, that I forgot to ask whether it should. I told myself that love was about patience, about endurance, about standing by someone through the worst. And maybe it is. But it should also be about honesty, about effort, about mutual respect. I gave him everything, my time, my heart, my future, and I never stopped to ask if he was giving anything back. Now, with the clarity of time and distance, I see the pattern. The emotional manipulation. The way he made me feel guilty for questioning him. The way he relied on my loyalty but offered none in return. The way he always had just the right words to keep me hoping, even when his actions told a different story. And still, even now, a part of me mourns the dream I held onto. Because hope, no matter how misplaced, is still real to the person who carries it. And I carried it for so long that letting it go felt like losing a part of myself. I did not just lose him. I lost the version of myself who believed that love, on its own, was always enough. After 10 years, the day finally came. I had imagined it 1,000 different ways, but each version always ended with the same moment. Me in his arms, holding on to him like I would never let go again. It was the only dream that had kept me going all these years. The thought of his release was the sun I circled around, the one constant in a life that had grown dim and gray. Everything I had done, everything I had sacrificed had been for this moment. Was for our second chance. In the weeks leading up to his release, I turned our apartment into a sanctuary. I cleaned every inch of it, reorganized drawers, scrubbed tiles, dusted corners I had ignored for years. I bought him clothes. Comfortable ones, stylish ones, the kind he always used to wear before everything fell apart. I cooked meals and froze them in neatly labeled containers, all his favorites, with care and love stirred into every pot. I even made space in the closet for his things, cleared off a shelf in the bathroom, and placed new towels there, folded perfectly. It was not just about being ready. It was about showing him that this had always been his home, that I had been waiting, faithfully, and that now we could finally begin again. The night before his release, I could not sleep. I lay awake, heart racing, staring at the ceiling, imagining the sound of his footsteps, the feel of his arms, the way his voice would sound outside the prison walls. I wanted to believe that everything would fall back into place, that he would walk through the door and we would simply pick up where we left off. I did not allow myself to think of the distance that had grown between us, or the doubts that had haunted me in the quiet moments. I buried those thoughts beneath excitement and hope. When I arrived at the gates to pick him up, I felt like I could barely breathe. I watched every man who walked out, my eyes searching for the face I had memorized so well. And then there he was. Older, thinner, harder around the edges, but him. My heart leapt into my throat. I smiled and waved, and he saw me, gave a small nod, a tired smile. I ran to him, wrapped my arms around him and held on. But something was wrong. His arms were there but they were not tight. His body was tense. There was no warmth in the way he held me back. I tried to tell myself it was just shock. That he needed time to adjust. That it was too soon to expect the fairy tale. The car ride home was filled with awkward silence. I asked him questions, what he wanted to eat, if he needed anything, how he was feeling. His answers were clipped, like he did not want to talk. He stared out the window most of the time, avoiding my eyes. I reached out to touch his hand on the gear shift and he did not pull away, but he also did not grip back. It felt like I was sitting beside a stranger who wore my lover's face. When we got to the apartment, I watched his expression closely, hoping for a flicker of recognition, of comfort, of belonging. But he barely looked around. I had imagined him smiling, taking it all in, saying something like, "You remembered," or, "This feels like home." Instead he muttered, "It is nice," and sat on the couch like he was just passing through. I asked if he wanted something to eat, and he shrugged. I served him one of the meals I had prepared, the chicken stew he used to love. He took a few bites, said it was fine, and then pushed the plate away. That first night, I had planned to sleep beside him again. I had cleaned the sheets, fluffed the pillows, made the bed just the way he used to like it. But he said he needed to sleep on the couch, that he was not ready to share a bed yet. He said it felt strange, overwhelming, too fast. I nodded, trying to understand, telling myself that he just needed time. But as I lay alone in that big bed, listening to the soft creak of the couch springs, my heart sank under the weight of a silence I could not explain. Over the next few days, the distance only grew. He did not unpack. He left his bag in the corner of the room like he was still deciding whether to stay. He went out for long walks without telling me where he was going. He avoided eye contact, avoided touch. Every question I asked seemed to irritate him. He said he felt suffocated, like he needed space to breathe. I told him I understood. That I would give him time. That I would wait. Again. But the truth was, something had shifted. He was not the man I had waited for. Or maybe he was never that man to begin with. He was cold in a way I had not expected, like someone who had moved on a long time ago but forgot to tell me. I tried to talk to him, to bridge the gap. I told him I had missed him every day, that I had imagined this reunion for years, that I was here, still here, ready to build a life together. He nodded but said nothing. One evening, after another long day of silence, I asked him directly, "Are you happy to be home?" He looked at me and said, "I do not know what this is supposed to feel like." That answer cut through me. I had built a home for him. I had built a future for both of us. But he spoke like none of it mattered. Like he had never asked for it. He started spending nights away. At first, he said he was staying with a friend he had met inside. Someone who was helping him adjust. I did not question it. I wanted to trust him. I wanted to believe that this was part of his process, that he just needed to find his footing. But the longer he stayed away, the more I began to wonder. I asked him if everything was all right, if there was something he was not telling me. He got angry, said I was pressuring him, said I did not understand how hard it was to come back to a world that had moved on without him. I apologized. I told him I only wanted to help. But I could feel him slipping further away with every conversation. There was one night I will never forget. I had cooked his favorite meal again. I lit candles, played his favorite music, tried to recreate one of our old date nights. I even dressed up in the blue dress he once told me made me look like the sky at dusk. I waited for hours. He never came home. Called. No answer. I waited until the candles burned down to nothing. I sat at that table with the food growing cold and the silence pressing in, and I finally allowed myself to cry. Not because he had not shown up, but because I realized, deep in my bones, that he did not want to. When he returned the next morning, he did not offer an explanation. Just walked in, took a shower and left again. That was when I knew. He had not come home. Not really. His body was here, but his heart, his mind, his love, they were somewhere else. Maybe they had been gone for years. Maybe they had never belonged to me at all. I began to piece it together slowly, with each cold moment, each unanswered question, each day he spent away. He had changed. Or maybe I had. Or maybe I had simply spent a decade believing in a version of him that never truly existed. I had imagined our love as something unbreakable, something that could survive even the darkest of times. But love is not a relic you can keep safe in a box. It lives or it dies. And his love for me, it had died a long time ago. Still, I clung to the scraps, desperate to find a sign that he still cared. I asked him if he wanted to go to counseling, if we could work through this together. He laughed, not cruelly but sadly, like he pitied me. He said he did not think that would help. That maybe we had just become different people. That maybe I needed to move on. Move on. After 10 years of waiting, 10 years of sacrifice, 10 years of believing, he wanted me to move on. Like it was that easy. Like I could just erase a decade of hope and pain with a single choice. But maybe he had already done it. Maybe he had walked out of that prison a free man in every sense, untethered, unburdened by the woman who had waited faithfully on the outside. I still remember folding the towels back up and placing them in the drawer. Still remember packing away the clothes I had bought him. Still remember the sound of his bag zipping shut as he left for good. No goodbye. No thank you. Just the soft click of the door closing behind him. And just like that he was gone. Again. Only this time there were no bars between us. Only truth. Only the hollow echo of everything I had refused to see. The days after he left felt like a hollow echo of everything I had once believed in. I went through the motions, waking up, eating, working, but inside I felt like I was walking through a dream I could not wake from. I told myself that maybe it was for the best. That maybe he needed time and that somehow, someday he might come back to me. Hope is a stubborn thing. Even when all evidence points to its foolishness, it clings to the edges of your heart like ivy, refusing to let go. One evening, after another day spent pacing the apartment and staring at the door that never opened, I did something I had never done before. I sat down at my computer and typed his name into a search engine. It felt wrong, invasive, like a betrayal of the trust one had given him so freely. But trust needs a foundation, and ours had begun to crumble. I needed answers, even if they shattered me. At first, nothing unusual came up. Old news articles about his trial, old photographs from better times. But then I found it. A profile on a social media platform I had never known he used. The profile picture was him, unmistakably. Older but still him. In the picture, he was smiling a real smile, the kind I had not seen since before prison. His arm wrapped tightly around a woman I had never seen before. A woman whose smile mirrored his. They looked happy. They looked free. My heart stopped. My mind tried to make sense of it. Maybe it was an old photo. Maybe it was a cousin, a friend, someone from his past. But as I clicked deeper, the truth unfolded itself without mercy. There were posts from weeks ago, months ago, years ago. Messages exchanged back and forth, filled with affection, private jokes, plans for a future I had thought was ours. I scrolled and scrolled, unable to tear my eyes away. Each new post another dagger in my heart. He had been in contact with her for years. While I had been writing him letters filled with love and promises, he had been building something new with someone else. While I had been sending care packages and saving money for our future, he had been sharing dreams and laughter with another woman. Felt sick. Felt stupid. Every sacrifice, every lonely night, every hope I had nurtured, it had all been for a man who had already moved on. I sat there for hours, staring at the screen, the weight of betrayal pressing down so hard I could barely breathe. My mind raced back over the years, re-examining every letter, every phone call, every visit. Had there been signs? Had he tried to tell me without saying the words? Or had he simply used me, a convenient comfort, a safety net in case his new life did not work out? I could not sit with the questions any longer. Had to know. I had to hear it from him, even if it broke me completely. The next day I found out where he was staying. It was not hard. He had left breadcrumbs behind without realizing it, casual mentions of places and people that, once I was paying attention, led me straight to him. I drove across town, my hands shaking on the steering wheel, my heart pounding so loudly I thought it might burst from my chest. When I saw him, he was standing outside a small cafe, laughing with the woman from the photographs. They looked so natural together, so familiar. He reached out and tucked a strand of her hair behind her ear, a tender gesture I had dreamed of for 10 years. I sat frozen in my car, watching them, the truth solidifying before my eyes. He was not confused. He was not lost. He was exactly where he wanted to be. I forced myself to get out of the car. I walked towards them, every step heavy with pain and rage. He saw me when I was only a few feet away. His face changed in an instant, from relaxed to wary, guarded. The woman turned to look at me, confusion flickering across her face. I stopped in front of him, my voice trembling but loud enough for him to hear. I asked him plainly why. Why had he let me wait? Why had he let me waste a decade of my life on a man who was never planning to come home to me? He looked at me then, really looked at me and shrugged. He said the words that would echo in my mind for years to come. I never asked you to wait. I stood there, stunned, the words hanging between us like smoke. I never asked you to wait. As if my loyalty, my devotion, my love had been some mistake I had made all on my own. As if he bore no responsibility for the promises he had whispered, the dreams he had painted in my mind, the hope he had fed with every call, every letter, every visit. The woman beside him pulled on his arm, telling him they should go. He did not argue. He just gave me a sad look, as if I were the one to be pitied, and turned away. I watched them walk down the street together, their bodies close, their steps in sync, while I stood alone, shaking, broken. I got back into my car and sat there, the world blurring through my tears. The pain was deeper than anything I had ever felt. It was betrayal layered over wasted time, over lost dreams, over a life I had built in my mind but never in reality. I thought about all the moments I had missed while waiting for him. The birthdays spent alone, the friends I had pushed away, the opportunities one had turned down because I believed in a future that had never been real. I thought about the girl I had been before him, full of hope and plans and fire. And I thought about the woman I had become, hollowed out by loyalty to someone who did not deserve it. Anger stirred beneath the sadness, a slow burning rage at him, at myself, at the years I could never get back. In the days that followed, I shut down everything that tied me to him. I deleted old emails, burned the letters, boxed up the photographs and shoved them deep into a closet. It hurt like hell, but it was the only way to begin carving out a new path for myself. A path where my love would not be wasted on someone who could not even see it for what it was. Friends I had pushed away slowly returned. Family members I had distanced myself from welcomed me back without judgment. They had seen the truth long before I had, but they never said, "I told you so." They simply held me up when I could not stand on my own. Healing did not come quickly. There were nights when I lay awake, replaying every conversation, every decision, every sacrifice, wondering how I could have been so blind, wondering how I could have given so much to someone who had given me nothing in return. But with each passing day, the pain softened, the rage cooled. The girl I had been, the one full of hope and dreams, began to whisper again from somewhere deep inside me. I realized that the greatest betrayal had not been that he found someone else. It was that he let me believe for years that I mattered, that I was waiting for something real, when in truth, he had set me aside like an old book he no longer wanted to read, while I clung to every word, every page, believing the story was still being written. In time, I would understand that his betrayal did not define me, that the years I had spent loving him were not wasted, because love is never wasted, even when it is not returned. Shapes you, teaches you, shows you who you are. And I was someone who loved deeply, fiercely, without reservation. I was someone who believed in promises and fought for them until the end. That was not weakness. That was strength. He was a stranger with a familiar face, and I had loved him with everything I had. But now, finally, I was ready to love myself more. The days after confronting him turned into weeks, and those weeks blurred into months. I moved through the world like a shadow of myself, still visible, still functioning, but drained of all the light I once carried. There were mornings I could not bring myself to get out of bed. I would stare at the ceiling, listening to the silence in my apartment, wondering how I had become a stranger in my own life. The loneliness was different now. Before, I had been lonely with purpose. I was waiting, hoping, believing. Now I was just lonely, and every second of it felt like punishment. I had never felt pain like this. It was not just the heartbreak. It was the shame, the embarrassment, the deep-rooted sense that I had been a fool. I had given everything I had to someone who never truly wanted it. I had poured my love, my time, my life into a man who had been planning a future that did not include me. And for a long time I did not know what to do with that realization. Could not eat. Could not sleep. Some days I would cry until I physically could not cry anymore. Other days I felt nothing at all. I stopped answering calls. I avoided friends who tried to check in. I pulled away from the few people I had left because I did not want them to see me like this. Shattered, raw, hollowed out by a betrayal I had never seen coming. But pain has a way of demanding attention. You can try to numb it, to ignore it, to pretend it is not there, but eventually it catches up to you. And when it did, I knew I had a choice to make. I could keep sinking or I could start to climb. Therapy was the first step. I had always been the type to think I could handle things on my own. I was strong, resilient, good at bottling things up and pushing through. But this was different. This pain was too big, too heavy. So I made the call, and I sat in a room with a stranger, and for the first time I let myself unravel. I told her everything. The love, the loyalty, the sacrifice. The betrayal, the shame, the anger. And she listened without judgment. Week after week, she helped me sort through the mess inside my head, one tangled knot at a time. I started journaling too. At first, it was just a way to survive the nights. I would write down everything I was feeling because there was nowhere else for it to go. The pages became a mirror, reflecting things I had buried for too long. Slowly, I began to see patterns. How often I had ignored my own needs, how easily I had justified his behavior, how desperately I had clung to hope even when it was hurting me. I wrote letters I never sent, to him, to myself, to the girl I used to be. And in those letters, I began to see myself clearly again. I had to distance myself from the people who reminded me of him. There were mutual friends, old acquaintances, even some of his family members who had once treated me like one of their own. I blocked numbers, unfollowed accounts, deleted old messages. It felt harsh at first, but it was necessary. I needed space, real, unbroken space, to begin healing. Every reminder of him felt like a fresh wound, and I could not keep bleeding if I wanted to survive. And then one day it hit me. I had been loyal to someone who never valued that loyalty. I had loved someone who never intended to love me back the same way. That was not a reflection of my worth. It was a reflection of his character. I had done everything I could. I had been honest, faithful, committed. I had believed in something deeply, even when it was hard. And while it hurt that he had thrown that away, it was not my burden to carry anymore. It was time to take my life back. I started small. I cleaned my apartment, not just surface cleaning, but deep cleaning, the kind where you throw things out, rearrange furniture, scrub every corner until it feels like new. I got rid of everything that reminded me of him. Clothes, gifts, letters, photographs. At first, it felt like erasing part of my history, but as the space around me cleared, so did the space inside me. Could breathe again. I was reclaiming not just my apartment, but my sanctuary. I reconnected with friends I had lost touch with. Some welcomed me back without hesitation. Others were more cautious, but kind. They knew what I had been through, and they let me come back at my own pace. We met for coffee, for walks, for quiet dinners. I started laughing again, slowly at first, like remembering a language I had forgotten. But it came back. So did the warmth, the comfort of being with people who loved me for me. Not because of who I was waiting for or what I had sacrificed. Work became a focus again. I poured myself into projects, stayed late at the office, volunteered for things I had once turned down. Not because I was trying to distract myself, but because I was rediscovering the parts of me that had been put on hold for too long. I had ambition, drive, dreams. I had buried them beneath the weight of waiting, but they were still there, waiting for me to remember them. Boundaries became sacred. I no longer let people take advantage of my kindness. I said no when I needed to. I stopped apologizing for things that were not my fault. I learned to trust myself again, to listen to that quiet voice inside that had always known the truth, even when I had ignored it. I started making decisions for me, not for someone else. And with every choice I made, I felt a little stronger, a little more whole. There were still hard days. There always are. Grief is not linear. Healing does not come in a straight line. There were moments when a song, a scent, a place would pull me back into the past, and I would cry all over again. But the difference was, those moments no longer destroyed me. They reminded me of how far I had come, of everything I had survived. One day, I looked in the mirror and saw myself. Not the woman who had waited for a man behind bars, not the woman who had begged for love, not the woman who had been discarded like she did not matter. I saw a woman who had loved deeply, who had fought for something she believed in, and who had the strength to walk away when the truth came crashing down. I was no longer ashamed of what I had done. I was proud. Proud that I had stayed true to my values. Proud that I had endured the storm and come out the other side. Proud that I had chosen to heal, to grow, to rise. And I knew, finally, that I was never waiting for him. I had been waiting for me. For the day I would stop looking for answers in someone else, and start finding them within myself. For the moment I would stop chasing a past that never truly existed, and start creating a future that belonged to me. I had learned to leave. Not just him. Not just the pain. But the version of myself who had believed love meant holding on, no matter the cost. Now I knew better. Love, real love, does not ask you to lose yourself. Does not ask you to wait in silence. It does not make you feel small or forgotten or replaceable. And I would never settle for anything less again. Course. Here is part 7 of the story, titled Freedom Was Never His to Give Me, written in a smooth, emotionally reflective style, with no contractions or shortcuts, and carefully structured to reach approximately 2,200 words for AI voice narration. I never imagined that losing him would be what helped me find myself. For so long, my life had revolved around him. His needs, his struggles, his freedom. I had believed that once he came home, everything would fall into place. That all the waiting, all the lonely nights, all the tears and whispered promises would finally mean something. But I see it now. Freedom was never his to give me. It was mine all along, waiting for me to recognize it, waiting for me to claim it. I look back on the woman I was, and I feel an ache for her. Not out of pity, but out of love. She was so full of hope, so determined to believe in love, even when it hurt. She gave everything she had, not because she was weak, but because she believed in something bigger than herself. And I will never shame her for that. I am proud of her. She is the reason I am who I am today. If I could sit across from her now, if I could reach across time and take her hand, I would not tell her to do anything differently. I would not ask her to stop writing letters or to walk away sooner. I would simply look into her eyes filled with longing and heartbreak and unwavering devotion, and I would say, "You are going to be all right. You are going to become someone so strong, so whole, that one day you will no longer see yourself as broken. You will see yourself as reborn." Took me time to arrive here. Healing does not happen in a straight line. There were days when I felt like I had made progress, only to fall back into grief when an old memory surfaced. But little by little, I began to understand that my pain was not a reflection of failure. It was a sign that I had loved with my whole heart, that I had risked everything, and now I was rebuilding from the inside out. I stopped needing closure from him. I no longer waited for an apology or an explanation. I stopped revisiting the past, hoping to find the missing piece that would make it all make sense. Some things will never make sense, not because they are too complex, but because they were never meant to be understood. They were meant to be survived. And I did. I survived. I started living for myself again. I traveled, even if it was just a weekend away. I danced in my living room without needing a reason. I took long walks with no destination, letting the air fill my lungs and the sun warm my skin. I tried new things, met new people, and gave myself permission to dream again. For the first time in years, I felt free. And in that freedom, I found power. I stopped defining myself by what I had endured. I began to define myself by what I had chosen. Kindness over bitterness, growth over resentment, self-love over sacrifice. I had learned what it meant to be loyal, not just to another person, but to myself. I had learned that my time, my love, my energy are sacred, and that the right people will never ask me to give those things away without care. I no longer saw waiting as noble. I saw it as a lesson. A hard, painful lesson about how we sometimes confuse devotion with self-abandonment. I had waited so long, thinking it was an act of love. But love should never require the erasure of who you are. Love should not leave you feeling empty, unheard, or invisible. So I began to rewrite the story I had told myself. The story where I was just the woman who waited, who gave her heart to a man who never truly held it. That was not my whole story. That was only a chapter. There was so much more to me than that. I was the woman who stood by someone in their darkest time, even when it cost her everything. I was the woman who rebuilt herself from the ground up. I was the woman who learned to say, "I deserve more," and meant it. I was the woman who stopped waiting and started living. If I could write a letter to the version of me who sat on that prison bench, holding back tears as she listened to promises that would never be kept, I would say this. "Dear you, I know you are hurting. I know you believe in him, in the love you have built with nothing but words and faith. I know you think that if you just hold on long enough, things will get better. That someday he will see everything you have done, and he will love you the way you deserve. But I want you to know something. You are already enough. Even without his validation, without his love, without his future. You are whole. You are worthy. You are strong in ways you do not yet understand. There will come a day when you will feel like the world has fallen out from beneath your feet. You will discover truths that will shatter everything you thought you knew. And you will cry. You will rage. You will question everything. But you will not stay broken. You will rise. You will find beauty in yourself again. You will laugh, not because you are pretending, but because joy will find its way back to you. You will walk into rooms and not look for him. You will look for yourself, and you will find her. You are going to be so proud of the woman you become. Love. The woman you are becoming. I read that letter aloud to myself sometimes, not because I need reassurance, but because it reminds me of how far I have come. It reminds me that strength is not always loud. Sometimes it is the quiet decision to keep going. To get up, to breathe, to believe in your own worth even when someone else failed to see it. I no longer carry anger. I do not need to. What he did, the lies he told, the life he lived while I waited, those are his to live with. I have my own life now. One that is not built on promises or waiting or sacrificing myself for someone else's journey. I have built a life that is mine. One with friendships that lift me, a career that excites me, hobbies that fulfill me. I have surrounded myself with people who see me, not for what I have endured, but for who I am. And I have learned to love myself in a way I never thought possible. Freedom was never his to give me. I found it the moment I realized I did not need him to come back. I only needed me. And I am here. I am not the woman who waits anymore. I am the woman who walks forward. The woman who speaks her truth. The woman who believes in love. Not the kind that asks you to shrink, but the kind that invites you to expand. If someone asks me today if I regret the years I gave to him, I will say no. Because those years taught me everything I needed to know. About love. About loss. About strength. About healing. But most of all about myself. I know now that I do not need anyone else to give me a future. I am writing it myself. And this time I am not waiting. This time I am already free.